Hey everyone and welcome! Today we're diving into a chapter that's not just a big deal for your exams, but for the world you're growing up in. We're talking about the sustainable management of natural resources. And look, this isn't just about memorizing facts. It's about really understanding the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the energy that, keeps our phones charged. So let's get right into it. So, what's on the docket for today? Well, here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the absolute basics, what our planet's resources even are. Then, we'll get into a super practical tool, the 5R philosophy. After that, we'll take a deep dive into our forests, our water, and of course, fossil fuels. And we'll wrap it all up with the big idea that ties everything together, sustainable development. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, our planet's resources. We've got to start with the fundamentals, right? What are we even talking about, and why should we care so much? Let's start with this question right here. Really think about it for a second. The air, the rivers, the forests, who owns them? The answer is nobody and everybody. They belong to all of us, and just as importantly, they belong to the people who will come after us. So, how on earth do we manage them in a way that's fair and smart? That's the real challenge we're going to explore. So, what exactly is a natural resource? The definition is right there, but let's break it down. It's basically anything and everything in our environment that we use to live. It's the whole shebang, the air, the soil that grows our food, the minerals we dig up, the coal and petroleum that fuel our entire world. It's the foundation of everything we do. Now we can split these resources into two main buckets. On one hand, you've got the inexhaustible ones, things like sunlight, wind, air, stuff that seems like it'll never run out. But here's the kicker. We might not run out of air, but we can definitely pollute it so much that it becomes dangerous to breathe. And on the other hand, you have the exhaustible resources. Think coal, petroleum, forests. These have a limit. Once they're gone, they could be gone for good, or at least for millions of years. So why all the urgency? Why do we have to manage them? Well, it's pretty simple, really. As this slide lays out, our resources are finite, but our population is just exploding, which puts a crazy amount of pressure on them. So good management is all about thinking ahead, making sure our kids and grandkids have what they need. It's about fairness, making sure everyone gets a slice of the pie. And it's definitely about being responsible, trying to do as little damage as possible when we use these resources. Okay, so that's the why. Now for Section 2, let's get into the how. How do we actually do this? Well, there's a really simple but powerful idea called the 5R philosophy. Think of it as our practical toolkit for making a difference every single day. All right, let's break down these 5 R's, and trust me, the order here is super important. The most powerful thing you can do is the first one, refuse. Just say no to stuff you don't need, like that single-use plastic bag or straw. Simple. Next, reduce. Use less of what you do need. Shorter showers, turning off lights, you get it. Then comes reuse. Can you use that glass jar again? Do it. And if you can't reuse it for its original job, maybe you can repurpose it. That old t-shirt, it's now a perfect cleaning rag. And finally, the last resort, what you do when all else fails, is recycle it. This quote hits on something a lot of people get wrong. We tend to think recycling is the ultimate good deed, the best thing we can do for the planet. But reusing is almost always better. Why? Well, think about it. Recycling takes a ton of energy. You have to collect this stuff, transport it, melt it down, and remake it into something new. When you just reuse a bottle, you skip that entire energy-guzzling process. So the takeaway is simple. Always try to reuse before you recycle. Okay, moving on to Section 3, forests and wildlife. Let's take all these ideas and apply them to one of our most amazing, most vital resources. Forests aren't just a bunch of trees, They're like these complex, buzzing cities of life, and they're absolutely critical for the health of our planet. And that brings us to this term, biodiversity hotspots. Let's unpack that. Biodiversity is just a fancy word for all the different kinds of life out there. Plants, animals, fungi, everything. A hotspot is a place that has a massive, incredible amount of that variety. But, and this is the key part, it's also under serious threat. Our forests, they are textbook examples of these precious, endangered treasure chests of life. So who actually has a stake in these forests? Who cares what happens to them? Well, we can break it down into 4 main groups or stakeholders. You've got the local people who live in or near the forest and depend on it for, firewood, food, and their livelihood. Then there's the government's forest department, whose job it is to manage the land. Third, you have industrialists, who see the forest as a source of raw materials. Think about it. The paper in your notebook, the wood for furniture, even ingredients for medicines. A lot of that comes from forests. And finally, you have nature lovers and wildlife enthusiasts who just want to see these beautiful places protected. As you can guess, these four groups don't always want the same thing. And history shows us, time and again, that local people can be the most passionate and powerful defenders of the forest. I mean, look at this amazing story from 1731. Amrita Devi Bishnoi, along with 363 other people from her community in Rajasthan, actually gave up their lives to protect the kedri trees by hugging them to stop the king's men from cutting them down. And that incredible spirit directly inspired the famous Chipko movement in the 1970s, where villagers in Gardwal literally hugged trees to prevent commercial logging. It's just an awesome example of people power in action. All right, Section 4. Let's talk about a resource we all use every single day, often without a second thought: water. And we're going to start this section with the story of a real-life Indian hero. Forget Superman, forget Iron Man. Meet a real hero, Rajendra Singh, known as the Waterman of India. In the incredibly dry state of Rajasthan, he didn't use superpowers. He worked with local communities, using traditional, ancient techniques to build thousands of small structures to catch rainwater. And the result? It was nothing short of miraculous. 5 rivers that had been dry for decades started flowing again. He brought water back to over 1,000 villages. It's just a stunning reminder of what can be done. Now, when we talk about managing water on a huge scale, one thing always comes up: building massive dams. And they absolutely have their advantages. They store water for farming. They generate clean electricity. But it's a real dilemma, because the disadvantages are huge. You have massive social problems, with entire villages being uprooted and displaced. You have economic problems. These things cost a fortune. And the environmental damage, from deforestation to loss of wildlife, is immense. This is exactly the kind of conflict that sparked movements like the Narmada Bachao Andolan. So, if giant dams aren't always the answer, what is? Well, a big part of the solution lies right here, in India's own history of local water harvesting. This table, this is pure exam gold, by the way. It shows how different regions developed their own genius systems, perfectly designed for their local climate. You've got Kuls in Himachal, Kadins in Rajasthan. This is ancient wisdom that's more relevant today than ever before. But look, managing water isn't just about how much we have, it's also about the quality. Let's take the Ganga River as a case study. This chart shows the levels of something called coliform bacteria. So what is that? Well, to put it bluntly, it's a type of bacteria that's found in the intestines of humans and other animals. So finding it in river water is a direct sign that it's contaminated with sewage. And as you can see from the chart, the levels are frighteningly high. Now, of course, there have been massive efforts to clean up the river. The Ganga Action Plan was launched way back in 1985. More recently, in 2014, the Namami Gange program was started. These are huge, multi-core projects. But trying to clean a river that's over 2,500 kilometers long and is a lifeline for millions, well, it remains a gigantic and ongoing challenge. Okay, let's switch gears for Section 5 and talk about the energy that powers pretty much our entire modern world: fossil fuels. We're talking about coal and petroleum. You can think of them as basically millions of years of buried sunshine, ancient life that's been compressed into this incredibly concentrated energy source. The thing is, there are 2 massive, and I mean massive, problems with our fossil fuel habit. First, they're non-renewable. They're a finite legacy. We're burning through millions of years of this stored energy in just a few hundred years. It's just not going to last. Second, burning them is really bad for the environment. It releases all sorts of nasty gases that cause acid rain, a poisonous gas called carbon monoxide, and of course, huge amounts of carbon dioxide, which is the main gas driving global warming. And all of this, the forests, the water, the fossil fuels, leads us directly to our final and maybe the most important section. Section 6, Sustainable Development. This is the big idea, the concept that shows us the path forward and ties everything we've talked about together. Here it is, the official definition of sustainable development. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it is so powerful. Development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Let me break that down for you in simpler terms. Live your life, grow, develop, meet your needs today, but do it in a way that doesn't steal from your children's future. It's the ultimate balancing act. And so, we end here. Because sustainability, it's not just a chapter in your science book. It's a series of choices that we all make every single day. The future isn't someplace we're just going to arrive at. It's something we are all actively building, right now with our actions. So I'll leave you with this one question to think about. What part will you play? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.